Greetings, strangers! I'm back again, and this is going to be another one of the Strategy 10... What number am I on? Strategy 105? Maybe 5, maybe 6. I think it's 105. And this video is going to specifically be on Age 1 macro and the importance of Age 1 macro and how to optimize slightly your Age 1 builds. I've been doing lately some like game analysis videos that people have been asking me. They've been like saying, hey, can you watch us play and make some comments on it, and I upload it to my YouTube channel, and then they can watch it and try and learn from some of the mistakes that I see that they make. It's kind of like being we have no replays. It's kind of like an alternative to replays, I guess, almost. But that kind of got me thinking, watching those games and watching. One of the things I consistently have been saying a lot in a lot of those videos is like it seems like a lot of people get a bit lost in Age 1, and they're like some of the things they do in Age 1 just aren't very optimal. And honestly, in Age 1, by optimizing your Age 1 and making your Age 1 more overall efficient, that really helps set you up for a better game. If you can have a more optimal start and have more resources and more villager seconds used correctly and optimally in Age 1, you're just going to snowball yourself ahead when it gets into Age 2 and building your first military production buildings and getting your stuff out earlier and stuff. So I just recorded a, like, I think it's like 5 minutes. No, it's not even that. It's what? It's like 2.5 minutes, which is basically my start of this game that I played, and I want to just highlight a few things from it. So we're going to go ahead and start this, full screen it. I'm going to pause it probably at some times, and there's a couple of really important things that I just want to highlight, and things that I think a lot of people probably don't know about that you can do to optimize your start. So the first thing that I'm going to point out is right away here at the beginning. Everyone, I think, knows by this point kind of what the general idea is for the start. You take your scout, you scout around, you find your hunts, and you kill the first hunt with your scout, and then once you find that hunt, you start building a storehouse with these 3 villagers over on your hunt. But one thing that often gets neglected is how you actually purely start. You can see my 3 villagers are right over here on the side, and my berries are right here. I don't know where my hunt is, so I'm going to obviously be gathering my berries just for the sake of having something to gather until I find my hunt. And what I've seen a lot of people do is they just drag a box around these and they right click on the berries. Seems natural, yes? But one thing that you can do to just save a couple of seconds, and now realize that all of these things that I'm going to mention, for the most part, are very minor, and they're not going to make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things, but when they're all done and they're all executed, and you can work every single one of them into your normal gameplay, you're going to save yourself probably, I don't know, maybe even upwards of 100+ resources just in the first 3 or so minutes of the game, which is huge. Gets your first military building much earlier, makes getting upgrades when you get to Age 2 much easier, stuff like that. So pay attention, pick up on a couple of these things. And the first one is your villagers, your starting villagers. When you could just easily drag a box around them and right click to your berries, but one thing that you can also do is you can garrison in your town center, and then you can use the ungarrison hotkey and pop them out immediately. It saves you the walking distance of the length of your TC and around your TC. So normally they would go all the way around here and they'd have to bump around and path poorly over to here, but instead, if you watch, I pop them in the TC and I spam the ungarrison hotkey, and they go from here to here much, much quicker and get right to business. So that's the first little thing that I want to mention. We'll continue the gameplay. Go around. Notice the first villager is instantly queued up. I set my first villager to the wood, and I kill all the hunts. That's pretty standard. I think everyone knows that. The next one is coming up here. Keep going. So notice I pop them in again to drop off the food and to reroute them over to the hunt, just to get them going a little bit quicker. Saves a little bit of time, right? Of course, everyone should be knowing that they should be using hotkeys for placing their buildings by now. Keep going. Alright, and so here's the next little thing. Here's the next little thing I'm going to mention. When you are building these storehouses, it's easy for a lot of people just to say, okay, these guys are gonna, all three of them are gonna build this storehouse, and then they're gonna gather, which is simple enough. It's moderately effective, and overall it's not going to make a big difference. But one thing to remember is these three villagers are not carrying anything, right? And so they can load up on these deer before the storehouse is finished, and then before they need to actually drop anything off. And so what you'll see me do here is I peel one off, I gather until she's at 8 or 9 or almost 10, and I task her back to building, and I peel another one off, and I wait until they're at 8 or 9, and I peel another one off. And the reason why I do that is because when you have fewer numbers of villagers building on a structure, the number of villager seconds that you're actually wasting is diminished. And what that basically comes down to is the fact that structures don't build at like a linear rate. That's not like you put on a villager and it cuts it in half or it decreases it by a linear rate. There's diminishing returns per each villager that you put on. So one villager optimally builds the structure. Yeah, it takes a little longer, but the number of resources that it optimally takes is the most efficient by only having one villager. So notice how I do that on both my wood and my food at the start. Alright, I take her off and I hover over her, notice, and I watch how much she's holding. And the second she gets to 8 or 9, I put her back on. And I know that the other one's almost at the same spot. And then I take him off and I put him on and I check him and I make sure that he gathers to about 8 or 9. Notice how I stop him short. If he gets up to 10, he's going to run all the way back to the town center. So I don't want that. So I pull him off right at the last second and keep him building. Now all of these guys have got 10 food in their hands. And at the same time, we've had the fewest number of villagers building on this as possible for the longest amount of time, which is going to, in the long run, save you a couple villager seconds. It's not going to save you a lot, but remember what I was saying. All of these little things add up. And if you can save 20 resources here, 20 there, 10 here, 10 there, before you know it, you've made up 100 resources and you have a free tech. So these are all the little things that it takes to take your gameplay to the next level. So they're filled up, they go there, finish there, and then they all drop. Notice how they were all at like 9 and they instantly got 10 and then they dropped. You can also see this guy here. I did the same thing here. This guy was just at 9. The storehouse wasn't quite done from the guy building at the start, and so then I switched the guy who was gathering wood to building here, and the guy that was building on here to start gathering wood. If you do that on both of those locations, I guarantee you save about 30 or 40 resources right off the bat, right at the start. So those are 2 of my little macro tricks for the starting of Age 1. The next one comes up here pretty quick. Notice how I forget hunting dogs. Try and avoid doing that. It's not too big of a deal, but you want to get that as soon as the first storehouse gets down. And then the next thing you want to do is, I think I do it here pretty quick, you want to split up your villagers. And the reason why you want to do this is if they're all right here, the second this deer dies, they're all going to go to a new deer, and for that split second, when that deer is dead, they're going to kind of like bump around and hit into each other, and you probably only gain like maybe 5 resources total by doing this, but remember, it all adds up. Just doing all these little things to optimize your start. Remember, you're trying to optimize your start as much as you possibly can. So splitting the villagers there, and then the next one and the last, I think, little macro tip that I have here, it's the last one that I've written down, is building a second storehouse early on your trees. And this was mentioned in the blog by the Microsoft people, by the balance team. I'm going to just touch on it again briefly. Notice how when you build a storehouse right up next to the edge of the trees, you can gather on this tree and you can gather on this tree. In some situations, maybe you can gather on like one more tree, kind of depending on how the tree line ends up being, but you can pretty much gather only on 2 trees on each side of a storehouse. You want to do by by building a second storehouse, the amount of bumping around that your villagers do is actually, this is actually quite significant. You probably save these 50 resources that you invest into a second storehouse are probably made up within a minute or two. So, and then it also just spreads out your vill line and gets you just better efficiency overall as you cut deeper and deeper into the line as well. So, that's another little macro thing that you can do by adding a second storehouse in Age 1. You really increase your efficiency. And then this, remember these kinds of, this little thing I was talking about with the villagers and keeping them from bumping around, you can do that on all your resources. You can do it on stone if you're building, you can do it on gold if you're building on your, gold with 2 villagers early in the game. You can adapt it to the civ. So for example, with Egypt, you might put on a few more on gold early, and you can do the same little trick where you're, building it with multiple villagers, and then you're switching them back and forth, flip-flopping which ones are gathering, when they're gathering, and how much they're carrying. So, if you can do those things and you can execute them properly, you're really going to end up saving yourself quite a bit of resources. Notice how here I've got this villager queued up, and I mean I was well able to make a 12 pop age up with 3 storehouses and hunting dogs all right at the bat. This villager here, yeah, I'm only really making this villager because it's kind of just my build. I do a 13 pop age up in a lot of matchups. But notice how I would have had plenty of resources to age up right at 12, and that's really fast. That's really efficient. So I've probably saved, by doing all these little tricks, these four little macro tricks, I've probably built up myself about 100 resource advantage. And you can see I'm playing against this guy. He's just some random from the chat. But if you look at the score bar, I mean, it's hard to mess up too much at the beginning, but the score bar here is already starting to go quite in my favor. And yeah, he warned me at the start that he wasn't very good, so I'm not holding him to that high of a standard. But just little things like that give yourself a big advantage. And then the second I get the required resources, boom, click to age. So that's just a short little video going over some of the macro tips. Watch this video again and try and duplicate or replicate those same little macro tricks in every game you play. And if you can crispen up your starts to the point that you're gaining, say, 100 resources on your opponent almost every single game, that's when it starts to really, your starts really start to flow, and it just feels easy to get out units, and it just feels much easier to get those first upgrades out. And a lot of times, if I play a game against someone who's lesser skilled than me, they say, how did you get so many resources at the start? Or how do you have enough to get, how do you get out that many units? How are you doing that? It doesn't seem possible, And they'll say, I'm doing everything right. I'm not idling my town center. I'm creating villagers constantly. I'm following the build that is someone told me that's supposed to be good. And the way that you do that, and the way that you build up an advantage, and the way that you get more units out, is by doing all these little things consistently all the time in every single game. So that's kind of a high level Age 1 macro tips and tricks video. And if you can get these down, these are some things that are really going to help you bring your gameplay to the next level. So that's all for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you like these videos, subscribe so you get an email every time there's a new one posted. And thanks for watching.